They laughed, loud, rich, untouchable. She stood still, black, alone in white. A word was thrown. A billion-dollar deal died. What they didn't know. She owned the room. The mansion in Montauk glittered beneath strings of imported crystal lights. It wasn't just a party. It was a power show staged carefully on the ocean-facing property of Douglas and Marion Kingsley, one of the oldest white billionaire families on the East Coast. Tonight was the celebration of something whispered, not announced, a $1.5 billion merger that would place Kingsley Global Technologies at the forefront of the next digital infrastructure revolution. But there were layers to this deal, and not everyone in the room knew who was really signing the check. Blake Kingsley, their only son, nursed a neat scotch while casually leaning into laughter with 2 senators and a hedge fund manager. His tux fit like it had been sewn into his skin, and confidence radiated off him in measured doses. He was being groomed, not just for the family fortune, but for legacy. Marion stood nearby, stiff-spined in an emerald silk gown, scanning the guests with the same expression she wore at board meetings. Her husband, Douglas, held his posture like a man who'd never been told no. "We're this close to closing," Blake said smoothly to a guest. "Just crossing the final legal T's." "And who are you buying out?" the senator asked. Blake smirked. "Some tech firm down south, black-owned, quiet, brilliant." He said black-owned like it was a novelty, an interesting footnote, not the headline. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Janelle Carter stood beneath a hanging floral chandelier, her back to the room, fingers loosely curled around a satin clutch. She was alone, but not unseen. Her gown was a deliberate white, clean, bold, unmistakably tailored to stand out. "Eleanor," she murmured to her assistant, who hovered close, nervously scanning the room. "You memorized the faces?" Eleanor nodded. Board of directors, PR reps, Blake, his parents. Their top legal counsel is near the fireplace. "Good," Janelle said. "Remember all of them." "They still think you're not here," Elena said quietly. Janelle's lips curved slightly. "Let them." A burst of laughter erupted from the main circle. Marion Kingsley leaned into her husband and said, just a bit too loudly, "Did someone seriously let housekeeping into the ballroom?" Another woman giggled behind a wine glass. Douglas chuckled under his breath. "God, Marion." "No, really," Marion said, eyes pointed across the room. "She looks like she's about to ask for someone's coat." The music didn't stop, but the air shifted. A waiter passed between Janelle and the Kingsleys, and the silence behind him was sharp. Blake followed his mother's gaze, then tilted his head. "Maybe she's someone's guest." Marion clicked her tongue. "Please, look at her. Standing like she owns the place." Janelle turned slowly, her eyes locking with Marion's, then Blake's. She didn't flinch. She reached into her clutch, pulled out her phone, dialed. "Mom," Eleanor said, suddenly pale. "What are you doing?" "Hello," Janelle said into the phone. "Yes, cancel the acquisition, entirely. No explanation. Effective immediately." A beat passed. "Yes, Miss Carter," the voice replied. Then she hung up, walked toward Marion without blinking. "For the record," she said softly, "I wasn't invited to your party. You were invited to mine." She turned and walked out, every step quiet, every eye in the room following. Silence gripped the ballroom like a fist. As Janelle disappeared through the arched doorway, the room's hum collapsed into scattered whispers. Blake stood frozen, drink in hand, heart thudding. His mother's laugh, once confident and theatrical, now hung limp in the air, half-formed and cracking. "Did she just?" Marion said, eyes blinking too fast. Douglas lowered his glass slowly. "What did she mean? She was buying us." Heads turned toward them. The senators, the board members, the lawyers, all watching, waiting for a cue that never came. Blake ran his hand through his hair. "You said she was—" "What? Someone from catering?" Marion flushed. I assumed—" "You assumed wrong." Douglas's voice was low now. That woman was Janelle Carter. Meanwhile, outside, Janelle's heels tapped softly against the Kingsleys' marble steps. She walked slowly, deliberately. The wind off the cliffs caught the hem of her white dress, making it dance like a flag, a surrender of nothing. In the back seat of her black Escalade, Elena sat stunned. "You really did it," she said softly. "You just killed the deal." Janelle slid into the seat next to her, expression unreadable. "No. They did." Her phone buzzed. A message from her legal team. "Deal officially cancelled. No signature. No obligation. No NDA." She stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked it and leaned back into the leather headrest. Elena's voice cracked. "They mocked you in front of 200 people, and still, you didn't even raise your voice." "They don't deserve my voice," Janelle said. She closed her eyes. Back in the ballroom, the panic had begun. Blake stood by the massive fireplace, jaw clenched as he texted the firm's legal counsel. "Get her back on the line. We'll apologize. Fix this." Douglas paced now, whispering harshly into a phone. Marion sat in a chair, stunned, watching the last 10 minutes play over in her mind. All around them, the room had begun to fracture. Guests started drifting away, the music limping along like a wounded animal. Blake's voice broke into a snap. "You said this was locked down. You said she was ready to sign." "She was," Douglas bit out, "until your mother made a damn joke out of her existence." Blake looked toward the exit. He hadn't said anything cruel, he hadn't even laughed, but that's what made it worse. He had said nothing. "If you've made it this far, you know this story isn't just fiction. It's truth dressed as drama. These moments happen every day. And if you believe stories like this deserve a voice, hit that subscribe button. Don't scroll past. Let this be the one you click." That night, as the Kingsley mansion emptied, Blake stood at the window alone, watching the ocean crash in the distance. He didn't know her, but she just cost his family $1.5 billion. And something inside him whispered, they deserved it. The Kingsley estate was quieter than usual the next morning. The staff spoke in hushed tones. Newspapers were folded awkwardly. The champagne had been cleared, but the tension had not. Blake sat at the long marble kitchen island, untouched coffee in front of him. His phone had buzzed 36 times since sunrise, all from lawyers, investors, news outlets. Janelle Carter hadn't made a statement, but her silence was making headlines. Mystery woman walks out deal dead in minutes. Tech queen cancels billion-dollar merger at high society gala. Was this a power play or public payback? Blake stared at the screen. He hadn't slept. He kept replaying that moment, her eyes, quiet, unreadable, and the weight of her words. "I wasn't invited to your party. You were invited to mine." He didn't laugh. He didn't insult her. But he also didn't stop his mother, didn't speak up, didn't ask her name. And now it was too late. "Blake," Marion said, entering in her robe and pearls, as if nothing happened. "Let's get ahead of the press. Frame it as a miscommunication." Blake looked at her like she was speaking another language. "Miscommunication?" She shrugged. She was clearly oversensitive. She's a CEO, not a saint. "Mom," Blake said, jaw clenched. "You called her Blackie." Marion waved her hand. "I didn't mean it. It was a joke. God, everyone's so sensitive these days." She was the buyer. She had more power than all of us in that room combined. Marion poured herself coffee. Well, maybe she shouldn't have come dressed like the help. He stared at her. For the first time in his life, she sounded small to him. Across the city, in her penthouse apartment overlooking the Hudson, Janelle stood barefoot on the cold tile floor, sipping tea. The sun hadn't fully risen. Her white gown from the night before was draped across a velvet chair, creased, slightly stained with someone's spilled champagne. Eleanor sat on the couch, typing emails. Damage control's already begun. Their legal team sent a statement. No admission, just interest in reopening conversation. Janelle didn't respond. "Are you going to respond?" Eleanor asked gently. "No." "You're not even going to read it?" Janelle turned away from the window. "I didn't cancel the deal because of pride," she said. I cancelled it because I've spent 15 years building something that deserves to be respected. Elena swallowed. But you haven't slept. You've barely spoken. I'm not angry, Janelle said. But you're hurting, Elena finished quietly. Janelle said nothing. Later that afternoon, Janelle's phone buzzed again. Another message from Blake Kingsley. Hi, I know I don't deserve a reply, but if you'll give me 5 minutes, I'll listen. No defense, no pitch, just truth. She read it 3 times, deleted it, then stared at the blank screen for a long, long time. At this point, what would you do if you were Janelle? Open that message, or let silence speak louder. Drop your answer in the comments. We want to know what you'd choose. In their separate worlds, both were spiraling. One with guilt, the other with grace. But neither of them could deny it anymore. Something had cracked open, and neither would be the same again. It wasn't supposed to happen. Not today. Not at this conference. Not in this city. And yet, there he was. Blake Kingsley seated 3 rows ahead of Janelle Carter at the National Tech and Equity Summit, where Fortune 500 executives, startup founders, and policy leaders had gathered to discuss corporate equity in the post-digital economy. Janelle hadn't planned on speaking. She was there to support another panelist, to keep her head down and her company out of headlines. But when the moderator called her name unexpectedly, citing her leadership in minority-owned infrastructure, she had no choice but to stand. Blake didn't turn around, but he knew she was behind him. And when she walked past his row and took the stage, he felt the shift in the room. Like everyone suddenly realized, this wasn't just news. This was consequence in human form. Her voice was calm, measured, unshaken. I built my company from a single rented server and 2 borrowed laptops. We've powered over 60,000 businesses. But the hardest thing I've ever done was walk out of a room full of people who thought my skin made me invisible. The audience fell still. I didn't walk out because I was angry. I walked out because they didn't deserve what I brought to the table. Somewhere in the second row, Blake lowered his head. After the panel ended, Janelle stepped off stage, heading straight toward the exit. She was halfway down the back hallway when she heard it. Janelle, wait. She stopped. Didn't turn. Just 5 minutes, Blake said, catching up. That's all I'm asking. She sighed. What could you possibly say in 5 minutes that would make that moment disappear? Nothing, he said quickly. I'm not here to erase it. I'm here because I need to own it. She turned to face him. He looked different, not polished, not rehearsed, just real. My mother, he said, has always walked through life without consequences. That night I let her. You were silent, Janelle said. I was, he replied, and I've regretted it every second since. There was a pause between them, thick with unspoken emotion. You lost a $1.5 billion deal, she said quietly. And you still think you're the one who deserves closure. He shook his head. I don't want closure. I want accountability. She didn't answer, just looked at him for a long moment, then walked past him. But this time, she didn't walk away with the same sharpness. Something had changed. A flicker, a shift. Back at the hotel that night, Janelle sat on the edge of her bed, eyes on the city lights. She had walked through rooms filled with arrogant men her whole life. But Blake hadn't defended what happened. He had faced it, and that unsettled her more than the insult ever did. They were no longer strangers divided by power. They were 2 people, stuck in the same room and in the same mistake. And the only way forward was through each other. 2 days later, Janelle sat at a long oak table at a Community Innovation Fund roundtable in Brooklyn, quietly reviewing grant proposals. She hadn't seen Blake since the tech summit. He hadn't messaged again. She was glad. And yet, her phone screen lit up far too often for someone who wasn't waiting. Ms. Carter, said one of the organizers, there's a last-minute speaker joining the panel from Kingsley Global. Janelle's pen froze mid-signature. Who? Blake Kingsley. Of course. An hour later, they sat on opposite ends of the table, both with neutral expressions, professional posture, and eyes that didn't quite meet. After the panel ended, the host pulled them both aside. We're thinking of co-sponsoring a tech equity incubator with both of your companies. Joint branding, 2-week boot camp in DC. You'd both mentor, face to face. The pause between them was sharp. It's temporary, the host added. We'll provide security and separation if needed. Janelle looked at Blake. He looked at her. And for the first time, she nodded. 4 days later, they stood in the same room at the DC accelerator, silent again. This time, forced proximity was literal. Workshops, presentations, team dinners. Neither spoke directly, until the third night. Janelle had stayed behind after a student QA, wiping the whiteboard clean. Blake entered quietly. You know, he said, I used to think my mom's voice was the loudest thing in our house. She didn't turn. Turns out it was silence. Janelle looked at him. He continued. When I was 15, my older brother came out. My parents sent him to this program. Said it would fix him. We never saw him again. Janelle blinked. You're saying that to make me feel sorry for you? No. I'm saying it because I know what it's like to watch someone get erased by people you love and say nothing. He looked away. I didn't protect my brother. I didn't protect you. And I hate that silence is part of my DNA. A long pause. Then Janelle said, My father was a union janitor in Boston. He used to clean the offices of the very company I now own. She set the marker down. When I got promoted to director, I found his name in an old employee database. They fired him for taking too long on a shift because he was mopping up blood from a manager who'd punched another janitor. Blake's eyes widened. That manager now sits on 3 boards I fund. I shake his hand every year. Why? Blake asked softly. Because I wanted power, Janelle said. But now, I just want peace. Their eyes finally met, not as opponents, not even as equals, but as wounded people who saw each other, maybe for the first time. That night, Blake sat in his hotel room, staring at a photo of his brother on his phone. He'd never shown it to anyone. He texted Janelle, For what it's worth, I think he would have been proud of you. She didn't reply, but for the first time, she saved the message. Ever carried silence so long it started to sound like safety? Ever wished you'd spoken up before the damage was done? If this part hit something in you, subscribe. These stories aren't easy, but maybe they're necessary. They had peeled something open, and though nothing was healed yet, the wound was no longer hidden. The 5th night of the tech incubator in DC ended with a rooftop dinner. The kind meant to be casual, grilled vegetables, string lights, quiet jazz in the background. But Janelle still wore her armor, tailored black blazer, high heels, glass of sparkling water in hand. She didn't want to linger, until she saw Blake sitting alone at the far edge of the rooftop, legs stretched out, staring at the Washington skyline. He wasn't holding a drink, no phone, just stillness. She could have turned and left, but something stopped her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was that message about his brother. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time in her career, someone who didn't deserve it had finally seen her. She sat down on the bench beside him without a word. They didn't look at each other, just stared out across the horizon. Capitol buildings, blinking lights, old stone structures that had survived wars, storms, and secrets. You ever think silence can be holy? Blake asked. I used to, Janelle replied. Now I think it's often just fear in makeup. He chuckled softly. I said something to one of the students earlier, she said, about resilience, and halfway through I realized I didn't believe it anymore. Why? Because resilience shouldn't mean tolerating disrespect. He looked at her. Then what does it mean? Having the power to burn it all down, and choosing not to. A pause. Then he said, You really could have burned me. I still might. She smiled just a little, and he laughed, not out of discomfort, but relief. A beat passed. Then Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photo. He held it out. This was Noah, a teenage boy, bright eyes, headphones slung around his neck, confidence even in stillness. He used to sneak into my room and steal my sketchbooks, said I couldn't draw noses right. Janelle took the photo gently. He was right. You can't. Blake grinned. I've improved. A moment. Then she pulled out something of her own, a silver keychain, old, worn, bent on one edge. My dad gave me this when I left for college, said, don't lose this. It's not just a key, it's a reminder. Of what? That even if the door closes, I've still got a way back to myself. The rooftop grew quiet again. Only this time, it wasn't heavy. It was safe, comfortable, like two people finally realizing they didn't have to carry everything alone. Why'd you come back? Janelle asked him. To the program. To me? He thought for a long moment. Because I couldn't live with the idea that my silence would be the only story you remembered me for. She looked at him then, and this time didn't look away. They didn't hold hands. They didn't promise anything. But they sat a little closer, and neither one walked away first. The final day of the incubator came with applause, photos, and handshakes. Blake and Janelle had kept their distance, publicly. But behind the scenes, things had softened. Smiles passed between them. A familiarity had taken root. Janelle even let herself believe maybe this didn't have to end in silence. That night, she returned to her hotel room after the closing ceremony, exhausted but light. Her bag slipped from her shoulder, landing on the couch. Her phone buzzed. It was Elena. You need to see this right now. Janelle frowned, opened the link. An article. Headline, Kingsley Global to launch new equity accelerator program without Carter Tech partnership. Her name was missing. The article mentioned her curriculum, her workshop design, and even the same incubator model, but no credit, no quote, no mention of her involvement. Just a press photo of Blake smiling with his arm around a senator. Janelle didn't call, she didn't text, she simply showed up, found him in the lounge of the hotel, casually flipping through his phone, drink half empty beside him. You used me, she said flatly. Blake stood. What are you talking about? She tossed the phone on the table. Read it. He scanned the article. Color drained from his face. I didn't write this. I didn't approve it. Janelle, I swear. But you knew, she snapped. You knew your team was working on something. You let them steal my structure, my work, and you smiled for the cameras like it was yours. I thought, he stammered, I thought we were still going to finalize it together. I didn't know they were releasing a statement. Don't, she cut in. Don't play the helpless son again. That story only works for men who get to inherit apologies they never earned. Blake stepped back like he'd been slapped. You said you didn't want closure. You wanted accountability. Her voice cracked now, not with weakness, but with fury. Accountability looks like stepping down when you've stolen something, not smiling on stage with your name in lights. I didn't mean to take anything from you, but you did, and that's the point. A long silence. Then Janelle whispered, I let you in. I let you see me. And still, this. Blake opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. She picked up her phone and left. That night, Janelle sat in her hotel room again. The city lights blurred through tears she wouldn't let fall. She had survived worse, but somehow this felt different, because this time she had hoped, and she was old enough to know better. Across town, Blake stared at the same article. He texted his PR director. Pull the statement. Now, apologize, issue correction, credit Carter Tech. Too late. The story was out, and the woman he never meant to hurt was gone. Again. Have you ever let someone see the real you, only to realize they still didn't value it? Would you give them another chance or shut the door for good? Drop your thoughts below. This one hits deep. The next morning, DC was wet with light rain. Not a storm, but the kind of drizzle that softens the edges of everything. Janelle sat in the window seat of her suite, legs curled beneath her, untouched tea cooling beside her. Her phone hadn't buzzed, not once. And yet, she kept checking it. The article was still circulating. Her name was still missing. 1,000 think pieces now questioned whether Blake Kingsley was the new face of modern inclusion. She wanted to scream, but mostly, she wanted silence. Not the silence that covered pain, the silence that reclaimed peace. Elena knocked gently and stepped in. "There's a car ready. Your flight's in 90 minutes. Janelle nodded, but didn't move. "Do I keep building bridges?" she asked quietly. "With people who keep burning them behind me?" Elena hesitated. "Or do I finally stop asking to be seen and just build my own city?" There was no answer, because it wasn't a question anyone else could answer for her. Across the city, Blake stood alone in a parking garage, staring at the rain slicking off his windshield. His father had called that morning. No apology. Just, "You should have handled it better. Now she's a liability." Blake had hung up without responding. This wasn't about Janelle anymore. It was about the man staring back at him in the rearview mirror, the man who had once stayed quiet, then laughed with the powerful, then smiled for the cameras with words he didn't write. He couldn't blame PR or his parents or the system. This was his failure, so he made a decision. He left the garage, cancelled his return flight, walked 2 blocks in the rain without a coat, hair soaked, shirt clinging to his skin. Then he walked into the Carter Tech Foundation HQ, uninvited. The receptionist blinked. "Sir, you need an appointment." "Tell her Blake Kingsley is here," he said, breathless, "and I'm not leaving until she tells me to." He stood there. 5 minutes, 10, 20. A few employees whispered, stared. He didn't care. Finally, Elena appeared in the hallway, eyes cautious, brows furrowed. "She doesn't want to see you," Blake nodded. "Then give her this." He handed her a small envelope. No logo, just handwriting on the front. Back in the suite, Eleanor returned, holding the envelope. Janelle opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet. No branding, just words. "Everything we used, you built. Everything we claimed, you created. If I get to be heard in this industry, it will be with your name spoken first. If I get to lead anything, it will be in the shadow of what you've already done. I'm sorry. Not for losing the deal, for almost losing the truth." At the bottom was a signature and a small note. "But if you won't let me say it in a room, then I hope you'll let me live by it outside of one." Janelle stared at the letter for a long time, long enough for the rain to stop. 1 week later, the Tech Equity Gala reopened its doors. Same chandeliers, same guest list, same high ceilings and sharper whispers. But this time, everything was different. The event's headline sponsor, the Carter Initiative for Inclusive Infrastructure. And walking through those double doors in a deep navy suit and braided crown, Janelle Carter was no guest. She was the host. Cameras flashed, microphones reached, but she moved like water through them, calm, purposeful. She didn't need to prove anything. She was the room now. Blake entered quietly 20 minutes later. No photographers swarmed him this time. No spotlight waited. And he was okay with that. He didn't come for recognition. He came to see her. From a distance, to witness her in full, to respect her in silence, the way he should have the first time. Then something happened he didn't expect. Janelle stepped to the microphone at the head of the ballroom. A hush fell across the golden-lit space. She looked directly at him, not with softness, but with certainty. "Last month, I walked out of a room that tried to define me before knowing me, and I did it without shouting, without begging. I walked out because I remembered something too many of us forget. We are not here to be tolerated. We are here to be treasured." Scattered applause began, then grew, until the whole room was clapping. Blake didn't clap. He just stood there, hands folded, eyes steady. She continued. "And tonight, we move forward. Not through silence, but through truth, through rebuilding, through real equity, not statements, not PR, but partnership." She nodded to her team. A new press release dropped instantly. Carter Tech and Kingsley Global announce reparative partnership. Equity through accountability. In the fine print, Blake stepping down from his official title, Janelle holding 60% of the board influence, all credit and curriculum now under Carter Tech. Kingsley family donating $50 million to underserved tech communities in her father's name. After the speech, Janelle stepped down. Not toward Blake, but not away from him either. They met near the side exit. No crowd, no fanfare, just them. "You followed through," she said softly. "I meant it," he said. "All of it." "So did I." He hesitated. "Does this mean we're okay?" Janelle smiled, but not the way he hoped. Something deeper. "It means we're not broken anymore, that's enough." He nodded, then pulled something from his pocket. The photo of his brother. "No more silence," he whispered. She looked at it, then at him. "Good." Outside, the city pulsed with light. Janelle stood on the steps for a moment, alone again, but this time by choice. Elena stepped up beside her. "Press wants to know if you're taking interviews." "Let them wait," Janelle said, looking up at the sky. "They've had enough of my silence. Do you believe true love, or even just truth, can survive being tested this hard? If this story moved you, drop your thoughts below. And before you go, we gave you 35 minutes of truth, emotion, and story that hits deep. All we ask in return? Hit that subscribe button. That's how we keep going.